Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like now to introduce Dr. John Purchase. He's the CEO of Agbiz South Africa. I don't think he really needs any kind of introduction further than that. As all of us know, he's a trusted advisor of many entities and organizations in South Africa and around the world. And Dr. Purchase will be speaking about the World Trade Organization and whether it's a relevant functioning body, probably especially for agriculture or not. Thank you, Dr. Purchase.
Right, we enjoyed that, Peter, and it's good to get a sense of where we're going, because we live in this interconnected world, and trade is going to become more and more important in this interconnected world, and we have to position ourselves correctly. So, to Deneen, Mariana, thanks very much for the invitation to address you today, for the good work that you're doing, and then also specifically to thank you for the theme that you've chosen for today. I think it's a bit of a neglected theme. It's come to the fore now with the global trade wars that we're experiencing, and it's good to question where do we stand and what conversations are we having around this issue of trade, and specifically also the topic that I'm going to address, the World Trade Organization. Is it functioning as it should at the moment? So why me? Why am I discussing this with you today, and why the focus on the World Trade Organization? Firstly, just as an introduction, because we do have a number of guests from out of the country who will not know how we deal with trade issues in South Africa. I'm the convener for business, the private sector in the Trade and Industry Chamber of NEDLAC. NEDLAC is the National Economic Development and Labour Council. There's a NEDLAC Act that regulates interaction between government, business, labour and community. And this is the negotiating platform that we use for various issues in this country, not just trade and industry. There are 4 chambers in NEDLAC. Trade and industry is one, but there's also the Labour Market Council, where the national minimum wage, for example, was slashed out recently. There's also the Development Chamber, and there's the Monetary Policy and Fiscal Policy Chamber as well. I'm also Deputy Chair of Boosters Economic Policy Committee, the EconPol, as well as an alternate director there. Agricultural trade, and especially primary and processed agricultural exports, are a major focus of Agbiz. We have a trade desk that we man, and then I attended the 11th WTO Ministerial Conference in Buenos Aires in December as part of the South African delegation in the process. So I think I have a fair sense of what we need to do and what is happening in the world. So just a bit of a background to the establishment of the World Trade Organization. It basically evolved out of GATT, the General Agreement on Trade of Tariffs, which arose in 1947 on the back of a really scarred world of the Second World War. And the IMF and other institutions like the World Bank also evolved out of what happened in the Second World War. GATT basically ran up until the 1990s. It's survived many conflicts, regional and also global, also the Cold War, eventually evolving into the WTO in the mid-1990s. The biggest problems that evolved around the WTO are with the Doha Development Round that was sort of launched more or less 15 years ago. And consensus was never reached on that Doha Development Round. In other words, bringing least developed countries and developing countries, helping them to get into the same frame as developed countries. Dealing with the Doha round was actually also there to assist with future negotiation agenda, but we must understand that the WTO is more than just a negotiating agenda. It is also a dispute settling mechanism, and that is one of the core functions that it plays. It must set the rules, and it must see that the rules are basically enforced on an overarching basis. But there are many challenges now to the multilateral trading system that have emerged, especially around protectionism, and especially the way the USA is interpreting that protectionism and implementing it. So what we are seeing is far more bilateral trade negotiation or trade agreements developing, preferential trade agreements developing between pairs and groups of countries. Okay, so the question is, quo vadis with global trade? Where are we going? And at the 11th WTO ministerial, there was no substantial outcomes, there was no consensus on the ministerial declaration. It was, in fact, really not successful, to be blunt. There was no mention even of the Doha Round in the communique. They could not even agree to that. There was minor progress actually just on the processing of fishing subsidies and e-commerce, as well as TRIPS, that's the trade-related aspects of intellectual property, non-violation and situation complaints, and work program on small economies. And the joint statement on trade and food and agricultural products to call on members to strengthen implementation of WTO SPS agreement by reinforcing the work of relevant international standard organizations and ensuring scientific basis of SPS measures. Now this is quite important, obviously, for agriculture. As relates to agricultural trade, which is probably also one of the biggest problems in the WTO, is there were no substantive issues on a number of issues that were raised, specifically on domestic support, that's subsidies, public stockholding, which is a food security mechanism that especially India like to use, special safeguard mechanisms, export prohibition and restrictions, and then specifically on the whole issue of cotton value chains. It was very clear that there were very divergent issues between the main role players, the USA, EU, China, India, Russia, Kearns Group, Africa Group, etc. And seeing this unfolding was tremendous, because it was a power play politics of big players in the world. Also, we've seen that the appointments to the appellate body of the dispute resolution mechanism have been blocked by the USA, so they don't even want that to function properly in the question. So the big question after the WTO Ministerial Conference in Buenos Aires, is this the death of really multilateralism in trade in the world, and also in agriculture? And that has not been resolved yet, because subsequently what has evolved is a trade war. And I want to highlight these. And it started basically with the introduction by the US of a 20% tariff on steel imports and a 10% tariff on aluminium imports into the USA. And Trump said trade wars are good and they're easy to win. Now, this might come back to bite big time. But obviously, people were going to react to this. It was aimed primarily at China, Russia, and Japan, and Canada, Mexico, and the EU were later also included. But there were certain countries exempted, like Australia, Brazil, and Argentina, but South Africa was not exempted, even though we only 0.4% of their imports of steel and aluminium into America. So what the power plays are here is very unclear. Okay, so the US has also now launched a full-scale trade war with China. I'm not going to go into all the detail thereof. They want more balanced trade between China and India, because China has a big trade surplus in terms of trade with the United States. And so they want to reduce the trade deficit by 200 billion by 2020. Now we've seen the stock markets become very volatile, and we've seen that economic growth is expected to decline significantly in the world, and also specifically in the USA and China because of this. Just to show you on the Dow Jones Index, subsequent to in December, that's more or less where that peak is, December, January, subsequent to the World Trade Organization Ministerial Conference, the Dow Jones has gone very sideways and very volatile. And people are not sure exactly how this is going to impact in the commercial world. We've also seen Larry Summers come out very strongly, and other experts, against Trump's policy in the United States, saying that it's fundamentally misdirected. Larry Summers was a previous Treasury Secretary in the Clinton administration. Financial Times have come out very strongly, even listed the 1,500 items that are at stake, and you'll see there are many agricultural products like soybeans, dairy products, etc., also involved in this process. And we've also seen that Trump has been scaling up this process. First it was, I think, 45 billion rands worth of of imports, then 100 million rand worth of imports, and now it's 200 million rand worth of Chinese imports. So it's all still escalating in this process. The problem is, and the New York Times ran a great editorial article on this recently, is going to hit the Trump voters the hardest. Already we're seeing that the big farmers in Iowa are losing approximately, or have already lost approximately 560 million US dollars worth of exports to Mexico, because Mexico obviously are retaliating and just saying we're not taking your pork any longer. And the same with the soybeans. China buys a quarter of all American soybeans produced, and they've stopped all imports of soybeans going into China now. So that's dropped the price of soybean. It also affects obviously our soybean prices, etc. So the spin-off effects across the world are immense. Now the question is Mr. Trump's bluster just that, or is he real? Is he serious about this, and how far is this going to escalate? Is it just a negotiating tactic out of a hardcore businessman, or will cooler heads prevail in this process? Now in the US, the people that have supported Trump, or also the so-called farm lobby, are starting to push back on this whole process. And there's, for example, the Farmers for Free Trade, which includes a host of organizations, corn and wheat growers, pork producers, American Farm Bureau, etc., have clearly said that the elected officials have asked him to end this trade war. So this coalition has reacted specifically to the prospect of Chinese tariffs on imported farm goods in response to the US's Section 301 actions. Now, in the latest developments, Donald Trump warned the WTO on the 2nd of July that we'll be doing something if the US is not treated properly. The WTO has treated the US very, very badly, and I hope they change their ways. Now, picture Donald Trump saying that. Now, I can't say it like he says it, and I don't have the hair to do it either. But there's a lot of bluster that's going, obviously, with this. The EU trade talks are to kick off soon. There's huge conflict between the EU and the United States on this. We believe that the US is threatening with further tariff imposition on cars and car parts. They've already got it on the steel and the aluminium. Essentially, what Trump is doing is using the guise of national security to impose these tariffs. And now they're getting retaliatory tariffs against these imposed steel and aluminium tariffs and other tariffs that he's imposing now. And because of the retaliatory tariffs, he's now taken then 5 countries or 5 trading blocs to the WTO and for dispute resolution. Ironically, what he's been blocking for the past few years. The whole NAFTA issue, that's the North American Free Trade Alliance or agreement with Canada and with Mexico, has really fallen apart and has to be renegotiated in the process. Because Canada and Mexico have also retaliated to the tariff increases that he has brought. Even his allies around him are going against him. And we've seen that there's a new president elected in Mexico, and he's taken a very strong position. He was elected on the basis of this retaliation. And how Mexico and how Canada are going to position themselves is going to be very critical for NAFTA into the future. The problem is, Trump has not yet laid out a clear vision as to the success of the trade fights he's in. Where is he going with this? What does he want to achieve with this? Because everybody is telling him, his own advisors, that it's just going to bring GDP down both in America and with the trading partners and global GDP. So there's no, the question is, what is the end game in this? Where is this going? We must also remember that his trade disruption is not limited to China. It goes, and steel products, it goes to allies and foes alike. He's obviously creating problems within NATO, within the EU, and his biggest allies. Clearly NAFTA, that's Mexico and Canada, are also in the crosshairs, as are other multilateral trade agreements like TTIP and TPP. The question is too, will China and the EU team up for the necessary multilateralism reform in the WTO that are necessary. There are reforms necessary in the WTO. There's no doubt about that. But to go into a conflict way of resolving them is not going to solve our problems. So there is the EU summit, EU-China summit on the go at the moment, and already Donald Tusk, the EU president, has come out and said that they are going to try and work with China and a couple of other major players to try and resolve those issues unilaterally, with or without the USA. So the USA might be marginalizing themselves in this whole process, even though the US is a key role player in world trade, in roughly 25% of the world economy. The question to agriculture too is that we have greater protectionism in agriculture in general, also not just through trade agreements, but also through the imposition of non-tariff measures and non-tariff barriers. And the problem is we need the problem is with the dispute resolution mechanism becomes more important. So the WTO and its dispute resolution mechanism is critical for agriculture going forward. So while Donald Trump is trying to, seemingly trying to break down the WTO, all countries must stand up and fight for multilateralism and to have a rules-based trade system in the world, especially around dispute resolution. The question is, where does this take agriculture and agribusiness into the future, and specifically our vision of a food secure world by 2015. So we need a serious conversation on this matter, both in South Africa and internationally. We have asked, through NEDLAC, the Department of Trade and Industry and the Minister to revise our trade policy. And we want to do this through NEDLAC, where private sector also sits. The trade environment in the world is changing, and it's going to change. There's no doubt about that. And South Africa and its trading partners, also within SACU and within SADC, and the development of a free trade, a continental free trade agreement, how we position that into the future in a new world trade order is going to be incredibly important. And that conversation has to take place now. So I want to leave you with that message. It's not good news that we have at the moment, and we need to be participants in that conversation. Thank you very much for the opportunity.